Hello, psyheads, and welcome to my new series of videos in which I'm combining music and philosophy. So, today's topic is something that is really interesting to me because I feel like all these thoughts and ideas I'm gonna share with you were like the biggest game changer in my whole music career. So, the topic is vertical versus horizontal perception of music and the color of sound. I know this all sounds really vague and like quite out there, but as we go on with this video, I'm sure you'll get and understand what I'm saying about it. So, a couple of weeks ago, I saw a reel on Instagram, like pretty random reel, in which a couple is talking about how they perceive music differently. So the girlfriend says to her boyfriend, like, to me, when I listen to music and I hear like first 5 seconds of it, I already know if I'm gonna like it or not. While boyfriend is like, what the hell? Like, I cannot even begin to imagine how does that feel, because to me it is much more important how the music flows and what is the story behind the song and behind the album and stuff like that. Like, you cannot decide whether you like the song or not in like 5 seconds. And this is basically what this is all about: different kinds of perception of music. And it is vertical in the case of the woman, which says, okay, I hear 5 seconds of the song and I know what is happening, I know if I'm gonna like it or not, versus horizontal. I hope I didn't mix those two up, but yeah, this is vertical, this is horizontal. And like, horizontal perception of music is, of course, it has everything to do with the story, with the evolvement and stuff like that. So, and this all really ties up to the color of sound. And like, I feel like the best approach to this is that I share my experience with these two perceptions in my music career. So, for those of you who don't know me, I am like a music producer that does mostly psychedelic music, but I'm all into like ritual music, folk music, traditional music, and I'm classically trained, so I play a lot of Vivaldi, Mozart, Bach, whatever you want. I'm saying this like as a background to my perception of music. And you know, I grew up in this household with classical musicians. My parents were both classical musicians, classically trained, so we were listening to a lot of classical music. And you know, sometimes I liked it more, sometimes I liked it less. Of course, as a child, you don't always understand all that there is to it. But my point is, I really feel like classical music has shaped my perception of music because it's the earliest version of music I listen to. And this, for example, made me really stupid when it comes to listening to the lyrics of the song. Like, really, even today, when I listen to music, I have no idea what the guy or girl in the music is saying. Like, lyrics, my perception of lyrics in the music is so bad because I grew up listening to instrumental music. My brain focused on totally different things. And also, with this, we are coming to our topic, which is like, growing up on classical music made my brain more receptive of the horizontal perception of music, because in classical music it's all about where this stuff is going, this modulation, this bridge, this blah 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 blah, blah. Now the thema is in another tonality and blah 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 blah. You know, it's all about this voyage through all these different feelings, melodies and stuff like that. The whole point of this video is basically that if you're a music producer, musician or whatever, you need to be really careful about combining both of those perceptions. You cannot just go just on one perception, just vertical or just horizontal. You need to combine the both to be the greatest version of yourself in a musical sense. So for example, when I was doing my first album, I was completely locked in and like caged almost in a horizontal perception of music, which is because of my growing up, blah blah blah, and you know. But I think you can really hear this. Like, my first album, Breaking the Cycle, I still think it has an amazing musical story. Like, really, from start to finish, the songs are evolving. There are recurring themes. There is something really that feels like storytelling through music, and I really like that. I feel like this horizontal level of music is really good, but I kind of disregarded the vertical perception of music, and this is why I think that's bad, because it just doesn't sound that good. Of course, I was just a beginner at music production and I didn't know all the tips and tricks and stuff like that. But it's also because I really focused on the story and much less on how does it sound in the moment. I mean, there were many reasons why that was. One of the reasons was because I was really beginning producing and I was an amateur who did all like master chain on a master while producing a track, if you know what I mean. Like I was producing a track and I had a bunch of compressors, limiters, EQs and multi-band dynamics on the master chain while producing a track. And this is something I really wouldn't recommend you to do, because when the time came and I was like, okay, I will send this, my first album, my first child, I will send this child to recording label, to a record label, and they told me, okay, just make sure that you don't have anything on your master channel when exporting the track so we can master it properly. And this makes perfect sense, but then I took all away from the master channel and it all sounded like shit. Like it was completely different music in a vertical sense. The story, the melody is the same, everything is fucking the same, but the vertical perception of music changed completely. The color of sound was different because it didn't have all those whatever it was on the master channel. So then I gotten into a little bit of a pickle, and for like a month or so I tried recreating that original sound I had with the master channel on, just through mixing or something like that. But I was really a beginner and I didn't know how to do that. So this final result is something that is, it is still really big story of my life, and the whole process of that album was amazing to me, how it interlocked between my psyche and the music and the album and la 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 la. It was so good. But in a way, this vertical point of music was lacking in that album. So this is just one of the examples how that works, because I can do the same song today, like with every same melody, same bass and everything, but I would shape it that it sounds better in a way. And it's not, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this about vertical perception of music in a way that you should know how to produce better or you should clean your track up so it doesn't, so it's not muddy or I don't know what. Like, it's not about that at all, actually. It's almost the opposite of that, because if you listen to like old school Goa music or like any old school, I think you will find that it has much more depth and soul, because it wasn't so produced, so massively produced, so shiny, And like a really good example of that is that Megadeth recently made a cover of Metallica's song, and when you put it together, when you hear Metallica's original and Megadeth's cover, you will see how Megadeth is too shiny, too overly produced. It doesn't have that soul, that that dirt from the amps that give the whole song. Yeah, a soul. I will call this a soul of the song, because it has something that is unique. It has something that is creative, because the job of a mixing engineer, it's not just to make everything sound perfect. It's to input their own creativity and creative decisions about how will something sound. And I think this is really important. Like, as I said, old school Goa trance sounds way better to me than new editions of psytrance, and exactly because every track had its own kind of taste, every track had its own something special, The kick were always different. Now all the kicks are the same, la la la. And I can go on about this forever. But yeah, so I really think this vertical perception of music is really important, and that's what I've personally been lacking for years and years. And I think it really means a lot, like where did you come from musically? I feel that if someone grew up on electronic music and like on Massive Attack and stuff like that, I think they would feel more this vertical perception of music. Because in lots of electronic music, it's really emphasis on that it sounds powerful, dirty, clean, relaxed, and stuff like that. And yeah, this is what I remember just now. Like, my first album is a really relaxing chill out album, side chill, completely la 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 la. But for example, it when you listen to it, it has all of these so sharp sounds, and they are not sharp sounds by nature, but they are, not compressed enough, or they are not like there's so many versions of it. What are you doing, Majki? Hello, come here. Give daddy a kiss. And anyways, so this is about putting your vision into sound, and not just story, but the sound itself. So especially in today's day and age, when like we are so addicted to a short attention span. So if somebody hears your song in first 5 seconds and they don't like it, you lost a streamer. But it's not about that, of course. It's not about being so it's not about appropriating to a wide audience. I'm not saying that, but you need to attract people with a short amount of your music, and I think that's great, and that's a great task you can do. So how to achieve that, how to achieve something that is special and really interesting. And this is how we tie up the vertical perception of music with color of sound. And what does color of sound mean? Of course, it sounds really hippie, it sounds really psychedelic, but I mean, like, color of sound basis means like how the sound shape, how is the sound shaped with its overtones or harmonics, so you can have the same sound, but if the overtones or harmonics are shaped differently, it will become a completely different sound. It will be the same sound, but with a different color. And this is what I mean, like the color of sound. Same sound, different colors, if you edit the harmonics, the overtones. And you can do that in various ways. And what I realized when doing music, I've always done a lot of EQing, for example, because this is like the basic stuff of editing harmonics in the sound. You take one harmonics up or down, and you can shape it however you like, and this is great. But I've realized there is so much more than that in shaping the color of sound. And the biggest game changer was when I embraced distortion and saturation, because as I said, my first album was so chill, so relaxing, and then I decided not to use distortion or saturation because I feared it would be too sharp for the listener's mind. But it is not like that. Yeah, of course, when you just put overdrive on a channel and it all sounds like yeah, of course it is sharp. But if you add like FabFilter Pro Saturn and just boost up a little bit of warmth there, it creates such a beautiful sound. It doesn't need to be sharp at all. It's just well-rounded, even more compressed, and the harmonics are different. But there are plenty of ways, like there are plenty of types of distortion, of saturation and stuff like that. And I think we should all play with them to see how different color of sound do they produce. So as I said, really, my advice to you is play with distortions as much as you can, like see what this distortion does, what this distortion does, because it completely changes the whole narrative of the song. And so this, of course, compressors, how you put your attack, release and stuff like that, which is really abstract, I know. Also, one of the biggest game changers lately was the texture. The texture thing, because you can put such a subtle texture so that basically human mind cannot perceive it. Like, human mind perceives kick and bass, but in there somewhere is a texture that glues it all together, if you know what I mean. And this is really interesting because I didn't use a lot of textures throughout my music, and you can feel that something is missing, and it's hard to explain, but it's just like it's too plastic, if you know what I mean. It's too sharp plastic. La, la, la. Sometimes texture is all you need to glue it all up in a one coherent mix, in something that is so pleasing sonically. It's a really simple trick, like distortion and texture and EQing and compressors. But if you focus on that a bit more than you do already, it will be amazing. So, I'm back in the studio in order to show you guys what exactly do I mean with all these colors of sounds and these distortions and textures and stuff like that. And I'll show it to you through the example of the latest track I've released, which is actually a remix, and it's out on all streaming platforms. Please listen to it, add it to a playlist and stuff like that. Link is in the bio or whatever. And yeah, so the first thing about this track you'll notice, that is in 100 BPM. So when people think about 100 BPM, they usually think of something like really relaxing, nothing too much, really mellow melodies and cute joint smoking, chill out stage vibes, you know, stuff like that. And this is nowhere close to that. And you'll see what I mean. And the reason why am I saying to you is so I can amplify the idea that even though this is 100 BPMs, it is nowhere near relaxed or mellow. It is actually quite punchy and aggressive. So let's just listen to the first drop, and then I'll show you what I did in order to make it sound like that. Yeah, so you can see it's really punchy and almost aggressive and stuff like that. So this was the idea behind this remix. I wanted to keep that primal, ritualistic and aggressive vibe from the original track by Quelled, but I wanted to add an electro kick and bass, you know. So I knew I really need to boost it and punch it and distort it and compress it and capture it to get this color I really wanted. So here's the bass of our bass, and it is already biting. And for example, I made a copy of it and removed all the plugins I've used to shape it, and this is how it sounds without them. And this is how it sounds with them. So you see what I mean. It's the same notes, is practically the same frequencies in the same, it's all bass, but it has completely different colors. And then we can expand on that by adding some more layers. But okay, let's first analyze the bass of our bass. You can see here I even left like Saturn and this plugin is actually really great for me regarding distortions. You have so many different drives and tones and modulations and stuff like that. But you can see that I played with that, but I actually decided not to use that. But I decided to use Bass Roundup preset from the Ableton Stock Amp plugin, which really did some great work on the color of sound, for example. I think I played with this and this and this. Without it, it sounds like this. And with it, it adds the warmth to the sound, makes it much more powerful and primal, and like it feels like it's coming from the earth. So of course I have some EQs and compressors, very important. LFO tool is here for the sidechaining stuff. But anyways, after this I added two more layers for this stuff. One of them is this one. And here we get this more biting color, and we add this biting color into the mix with this layer. And as you can see, I also used Bass Roundup. I probably just copied the original bass of the bass And then I added something more. For example, the first thing I did here, you can probably hear this is a stereo sound, which means I get to my serum and I put two voices and detune them a bit. So we will get the stereo sound. And I amplify that stereo feeling with phaser here. So I added a really slow phaser here, which adds the feeling of breathing sound, and also the sound that is really wide in a stereo way. But of course, the stereo sounds need to be cut below the, I don't know, I used 178 hertz. This is usually the point I do. And as you can see, I added OTT here from Multiband Dynamics from Ableton, which really crushed it even more. And this is actually what is creating such a sharp tone to it, you know? Of course, compressor and of course sidechain. And another one, this is more for ambience. Where this is sharp one, this is adding some width in other ways. And it's pretty much similar, but it's probably just different waveforms in serum, sorry. Okay, so, you know, we have original bass of the bass. Then, with the sharp layer, it's this. And then, with another layer, is this. And I think you can hear how the phaser is modulating the sharp layer, and it really feels like it's breathing. And now this makes more sense, because the original was this. You know, it's really static, it's not going anywhere, it doesn't have the punch, it doesn't have the aggressive, it doesn't have anything, it doesn't have a body, and it doesn't have a character. And this is what it's all about, adding character to your sound. So these are some examples of my approach to these things. And as I said, I would really recommend you play with other versions of distortions, like Saturn by FabFilter. Oh my god! FabFilter Pro! Yeah, FabFilter Pro, yes. And this BOYUD, it's really great plugin, free plugin, which has a variety of different sounds and distortions and saturations and stuff like that. You can use Ableton stuff like amps or saturator, of course, or overdrive for something more extreme, multiband dynamics and stuff like that. Just play with that and explore what different colors you can get with different types of distortions. Of course, Serum has distortions by itself, and I used tube distortion here as well. And this is what is really interesting about this, is that it's always better to put a couple of smaller distortions on a channel than one really big one. So a couple of more smooth distortions will add to a much more quality sound and something you really want. Okay, so this is the talk about distortions, but it's not finished there. As I said, one of really important parts of creating the color of sound you want is adding texture. And because this is a remix, I used textures from the original song, but I will just show you how these textures help you glue everything together. And I'll think you'll see what I mean. So we have just pure kick and bass here. But if I add this drone, which I sidechained with the kick, it's pretty basic, but it adds some ambience and some width, because without it, the danger is that the kick and bass will sound too plastic and too disconnected from the story of the track and from all the rest of the sounds, you know. So I use this, and also, I mean, this is not even really a texture, this is more of a percussion, but this is what I really like in this track, is this addition of percussion to it. And this thing is the most simple thing I probably ever did, but it sounds so good. So you have a drum loop audio sample, and I just went to beats, preserve 116 and this type, and lowered the sustain mode, and I pitch shifted it way up because the original sounds like this. You know, it is epic, but it is a little bit in the ground and it's clashing with the kick and bass and the texture and whatever. But if you pitch shift it up, it's really interesting what the beats warp mode will create such an interesting artifact. And you will add this percussive texture to your mix and make it even more interesting. Of course, I sidechained it, I cut the low frequencies, I compressed it and stuff like that. So yeah, you know, these are just the examples how you should think more about textures, about distortions, about colors of sound to get what you want. Because you need to be the master of the character of your track. You need to be the master of the character of your track. It's not just about, okay, I'll create a track in 140 BPMs and I'll put just kick and bass there. No, you need to shape them so it fits your vision, so it fits the character of your vision. And you have a lot of tools to do that, but I feel they are oftentimes forgotten in the pursuing of the final product of the track, which is sometimes just, okay, let's just put kick and bass and let's do this and this and this. Oh yes, I almost forgot, there is also this kind of screaming in the background. So this is basically just a really good sample of scream, let's say. And I really boosted the reverb on this one with Valhalla Supermassive. The feedback is huge, and I played with delay warp, that's why it's lowering in pitch gradually, and I put a huge sidechain here. So this creates that yeah, 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 yeah. It's really haunting because you have a scream which is haunting by itself, and you add a huge amount of reverb, which makes it even more eerie-like. And then you sidechain it with the kick and bass, so it's like in the same story. And this is the result. And please remember, even though I'm focusing much more on how to shape the color of your sound and how to create this vertical perception of music to sound really good, that doesn't mean that you should discard the horizontal perception of music. This is just coming from my own story, and in my own story, horizontal perception of music is something that comes really naturally and easy, and this is where I had to explore and build and work on it to get to this level where I can be the master of it. And this is what is interesting, because when I was a beginner at producing music, sometimes the color of sound would be just perfect. But it was perfect on accident. You're not really a master of your craft if everything you do happens to be good, but on accident you really need to know the reasons why it sounds so good. Sometimes just the stars would align in my favor, you know? Somehow the kick and the bass would fit perfectly, even though I didn't sidechain them at all, or I'd never put any warmth or distortion on anything, so it doesn't need to be by accident. You need to be aware of the tools you possess so you can shape the sound in whatever way you want. But yeah, of course, don't get me wrong, there are plenty and plenty of tracks I hear that have this perfect vertical constitution of a track where it just sounds so good. It's like it massages your brain, in the moment. It's so good, and then you get into it, and after a while you realize it's not going anywhere. And it also sucks in a way. I mean, I love it. I love the craftsmanship of just creating such an amazing sound. But that's not enough. The sound needs to evolve somewhere. Otherwise, you feeling like you're stuck. And the thing is, music is an art form that uses time as its canvas. So music must progress somewhere, must progress forwards. Without that, you're feeling like you're stuck, and you're feeling like it doesn't make any sense. So this is it. I'm really hoping you found some of these things interesting, and that it maybe inspired you and helped you in creating your own sound. So this is the whole idea: create your own sound, explore your own sound without, succumbing to the modern sound, to succumbing to the idea this should sound exactly like this and there is no other way that it should sound. Like, this is all bullshit. Find your own sound, and you will find it if you play enough, and if you explore enough, and if you learn enough, and if you share enough. It's all a part of the progress. So stay safe, psyheads, and see you some other time. Bye.